Ellen, always enthusiastic and concerned, led Ruby out to the main hall after helping her change. "Try this, Ruby. You haven't eaten anything all day," she said, handing her a plate. Ruby felt flustered. "Ellen keeps telling me to eat whenever she sees me." "I'm really fine," she thought. Suddenly, a young girl approached and asked, "Ellen, what's wrong? Isaac doesn't look very well." "I don't know either," Ellen replied, quickly turning her attention to Isaac. "Let me go check. You stay here with Ruby." Ruby blushed. "Hey, I'm not a child who needs looking after," she muttered to herself. As soon as Ellen left, 3 men hurriedly asked, "Is Madam all right? I heard she wasn't feeling well." Still trying to explain, Ruby replied, "It's a bit complicated, but I'm fine now." The young lady looked relieved, her face filled with concern. "Thank goodness, I was so worried," she said, but then added, "Is something wrong between you and Isaac?" "No, nothing's wrong," Ruby responded politely. "Miss, I'm all right now, so you can go attend to your other guests. You probably need to greet a lot of people." "Oh, well then, if anything feels inconvenient, just let someone know," the girl said, departing. Ruby thought to herself, who can I even tell? But why had Isaac insisted on bringing her here? Was he planning to announce a divorce at his birthday party? Ruby couldn't help but overthink. No, don't be so negative," she reminded herself. Just then, someone approached her. "I thought you wouldn't come today." It was Princess Aren. Seeing the little princess, Ruby gently bowed and replied, "I had some matters to attend to, so I'm late. Who did you come with, Princess?" The little princess innocently replied, "I came with my nanny. My mother doesn't usually attend events like this." Looking at the small princess, Ruby couldn't help but sympathize silently. Compared to the royal siblings, the king's grandchildren, the queen consort, who came from a slave background, attending this kind of party felt a bit out of place. Suddenly, a childish voice interrupted Ruby's thoughts. "Madam, your husband is a holy knight, isn't he? My brother is a holy knight too." Ruby turned to see a young noble lady. Smiling politely, she greeted her. "Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you, miss. Do you know my husband?" The little girl beamed with pride. "Probably. My brother is quite famous after all." Ruby chuckled to herself. Just by looking at her proud demeanor, she could already guess what type of person this girl was. Charming in appearance, but spoiled in personality. The girl continued boasting. "Madam, your husband used to carry me on his shoulders." Ruby was surprised. "Really? Isaac did that?" But the girl clarified, "It was actually my brother who made him put me up there." Just imagining the scene, Ruby couldn't help but smile. I can picture Isaac's face during that moment. Nearby, 2 other young girls, Leah and Princess Aren, were whispering. "I heard the princess touched Madam's hair first," Leah said curiously. "It's true," Princess Aren whispered back, "but we can't do that now. Everyone is watching." Leah, being naturally curious and a bit proud, pouted. "But I want to touch it now." Not wanting the 2 children to argue, Ruby kindly intervened. "You can touch it now, it's all right. It doesn't matter if people are watching." Leah's eyes lit up with joy at Ruby's permission, and Princess Aren was delighted as well. As the 2 girls played happily, touching and braiding Ruby's hair, Ruby complimented them. "Did I braid it nicely? You're both very good at it." Suddenly, someone approached. It was Isaac. His cold voice broke the playful mood. "What are you doing here?" The 3 of them froze as they turned to face him. Ruby stammered, "Where have you been?" Isaac sighed. "I'm the host of this party, remember?" Ruby could only laugh awkwardly, thinking to herself, is he really bragging about being the main character here? Just then, Leah's brother appeared as well, smiling as he observed the scene. As expected, Madam is playing with her. Ruby raised an eyebrow. "As expected? What do you mean?" He playfully scolded his little sister. "Leah, have you properly greeted Madam?" Leah giggled mischievously. Yeah, I even cursed you a little too. Ruby laughed, explaining to Isaac, the princess and Leah were just playing with me. Suddenly, a hand appeared before Ruby's eyes. Is he being more generous to me because it's his birthday, or is he just moody, she wondered. Although she couldn't quite understand Isaac, Ruby unconsciously extended her hand, and Isaac helped her up effortlessly. His expression remained unchanged, but his actions were warm. This unexpected tenderness made Ruby unable to contain her emotions, and she blurted out, "Could you do that again?" Of course, she quickly realized what she should have said instead. "I'm sorry, I won't bother you any more." But Isaac's eyes were still fixed on her, making her uneasy. Wait a minute, why is he staring at me like that? Could it be because of... Ruby suddenly remembered she hadn't given him his gift yet. "Oh, right, I have a gift for you," she said, fumbling to retrieve the gift bag she had prepared earlier. Seeing Isaac's gaze shift to the bag, Ruby thought, as expected, this is what he wants, isn't it? She couldn't help but smile at the thought. What a snobbish man! Yet, she handed him the gift with sincerity. "It got a little wet in the rain earlier, so it's not very pretty, but I stayed up all night making it. I hope you like it. Happy birthday!" "I'm so glad you were born." Ruby's eyes were filled with affection as she spoke, pride swelling up inside her. From a distance, the scene appeared to be one of affection and ambiguity, but in reality, Ruby was feeling flustered. "Hurry up and take it, my hand is getting tired." Finally, Isaac accepted the gift, looking at it with curiosity. "What is this?" he asked. Ruby hurriedly explained. "It's a letter." "No, it's a self-criticism filled with my sincerity." She thought to herself, if I say it's just a letter, he'll probably throw it away immediately. Isaac, unsure of how to process his emotions, gripped the gift tightly. Still, with his usual cold and indifferent demeanour, he muttered, "It's just full of nonsense." Ruby, noticing the same expression on his face as before, felt a pang of disappointment. "Don't you like it?" she asked. To her surprise, Isaac's response made her happy again. "No, I like it." Outside, the weather at the castle was getting colder. The wind howled, and even indoors Ruby, with her poor cold tolerance, shivered. "This northern weather! It's probably hard to see the sun until summer comes." Suddenly, someone she had nearly forgotten about made their return. Duke Alta, Isaac's father. He had come to see Ruby and Ellen early in the morning. "Please forgive me for the late greeting," he said sternly. Ruby responded politely. "It's okay, I wanted to greet you when you felt more comfortable." As the Duke looked at Ruby, he felt disappointment. "My son doesn't resemble me at all, except for his eyes. He must have inherited his appearance from the Duchess." The Duke then said, "My son is a fool, so I'm worried that he won't treat you well." But contrary to the Duke's concerns, Ruby replied cheerfully, "He's very kind to me." This surprised the Duke. That brat. Meanwhile, Ellen, sitting beside Ruby, was in a bad mood. "You missed his birthday," she remarked. The Duke, surprisingly unconcerned, replied, "That brat prefers it when I'm not around. You missed the wedding anniversary too." His Majesty was quite disappointed. But the Duke didn't seem guilty about these things. "Honestly, it's not like it's just a day or two," he thought. Then he suddenly shifted the topic to Ruby. "By the way, madam, have you visited the temple yet?" This question made Ruby freeze for a moment. Visiting the temple? It wasn't about whether she, as the Pope's daughter, viewed her presence here as political, but a direct way of asking if she had spent her wedding night. In the north, after a noble couple wed, it was customary to spend their wedding night together and then visit the temple as a formal sign they had become husband and wife. Duke Omerta was essentially asking if she and Isaac had consummated their marriage. It was an unexpected and awkward question. In the original story, Ruby and Isaac had never fulfilled that duty, even until their eventual divorce. No one had forced them. Just as Ruby was lost in her thoughts, the Duke's stern voice brought her back to reality. He had already guessed the situation from her hesitation. Seeing the tension, Ellen tried to diffuse the situation, saying, "He wasn't there that day." But for a noble family like Omerta, this was unacceptable. The Duke stood up abruptly, shouting, "The wedding was held ages ago, and you still haven't fulfilled your duty. I don't know how to process this." Ruby, caught off guard, silently screamed to herself, "Why are you asking me this?" The Duke continued sternly, "I was reassured by the Pope that there would be no incident to disgrace the North. So what is this?" The Duke's reaction was understandable given Ruby's colourful past. Without having experienced the wedding night, it was hard to consider the marriage official. A proud family like Omerta would never accept being jilted by the other party, especially with Ruby's history of being abandoned by previous grooms. Moreover, the Duke had actively promoted this marriage to correct his son's asceticism. He had expected the marriage to last and had high hopes for it. After thinking it over, Ruby decided to tell her father-in-law that she hadn't been feeling well recently, which was why the temple visit had been delayed. She assured him that now that she was better, she would visit the temple soon. The Duke, frustrated but trying to be understanding, sighed. He likely had more to say, but held back for now. "If that's the reason, I'm a bit relieved. You must have felt rushed with the wedding happening so quickly," he said, patting her head. So he's only gentle when he's like his father, Ruby thought. Outwardly, she appeared happy and accepting of the marriage, but internally she had long-term plans. If they consummated the marriage, it would be difficult to annul, as annulment was only possible if the marriage hadn't been consummated. But divorce was another matter entirely, and in Romania, ruled by the Pope, divorce was strictly forbidden, regardless of the circumstances. If they became a real couple, the Duke likely aimed to secure leverage for his son in case of any future political complications. In the original story, after the divorce, Ruby had poisoned Isaac's fiancée, Alnia, and returned to Romania. If the divorce procedure became more complicated, the assassination might be delayed, and Isaac would likely leave her in the north, since it would be troublesome to handle. "At least I won't have to return to that horrible place," Ruby thought. She thought so hard that her brows furrowed. "The only problem is how to consummate the marriage with my taciturn husband," she mused, still lost in thought. Suddenly, someone called out to Ruby, "Madam!" It turned out to be Emo, who waved to get her attention. "You came at the right time." Seeing Emo call her, Ruby immediately ran out into the hallway to speak to him directly. "What's the matter?" she asked, concerned. Actually, it wasn't anything serious. Emo was just happy to see her. "What? It seems he's just free," Ruby thought, as Emo casually continued the conversation, asking if she had come to see Isaac. Ruby didn't hesitate to admit it and handed the fruit basket she was holding to Emo, asking if her grumpy husband might want to eat some fruit. Emo smiled, rubbing his head in gratitude. "Thanks for the basket," he said. He was actually more grateful because he, too, was hungry. He probably planned to devour most of the fruits Ruby had brought for Isaac. As they chatted animatedly, suddenly Mr. Guier appeared right behind Emo. "Fruit," he said calmly, startling everyone. Ruby's heart nearly stopped from fear. Her limbs felt weak and her teeth chattered. But she still politely offered the basket of apples to Guier. He had such a fierce appearance, yet in Ruby's eyes he looked like a stuffed kindergarten tiger. Without a word, he grabbed an apple, turned around and left, munching as he walked. After a moment of silence, Emo explained, "That's my brother." Ruby laughed, relieved to find that he looked like a reliable older brother after all. They continued chatting, but suddenly Emo remarked, "By the way, madam, Isaac's training." From where they stood, they had a clear view of Isaac training with the other knights below. Isaac swung his sword with precision, and the other knights flew backward, overwhelmed by his sheer strength. Ruby and Emo, impressed, started cheering for Isaac. "So cool! Truly my superior!" they shouted, waving energetically. Isaac, hearing their cheers, paused for a moment. He looked up at the balcony with a loving gaze, though his expression made it seem like dozens of knives were about to be thrown at them. Ruby, stammering, said, "Sir Knight, the best knight in the north." is different, right? Emo nodded but added with a chuckle, yeah, but sometimes he feels more like a monster, don't you think? Ruby and Emo exchanged awkward laughs. Just as Gear left the scene, Ivan appeared out of nowhere and ambushed Emo, hitting him hard on the head. "While we train hard and sweat, you're lazing around like this," he scolded. Then, noticing Ruby, Ivan quickly changed his tone. "Oh, madame, you're here early today." His expression softened when speaking to Ruby, turning from harsh to sweet in an instant, like flipping a pancake. Seeing Emo get scolded to the point where his IQ seemed to drop, Ruby quickly intervened. "Sir Ivan, Emo was keeping me company so I wouldn't be lonely," she explained. But before she could finish, Ivan interrupted. "Madam, this guy isn't a knight, he's just a mere attendant," he said, gesturing toward Emo. Poor Emo could only nod in agreement. Yes, you can just call me Emo," he admitted sheepishly. Just then, someone from the courtyard below shouted, "Emo, are you seducing the madam?" It was Isaac, making his way up the stairs with deliberate heavy stomps. Reaching Ruby, Isaac wiped the sweat from his brow, glancing at her with a teasing smile. Seeing this, Ruby couldn't help but slip into her usual antics, looking at Isaac with sparkling eyes. "You know, you were super cool just now. I think I've fallen for you all over again," she said, her voice dripping with cheesy sweetness. Isaac gave her a look that left everyone speechless. As soon as Isaac arrived, Ivan quickly dragged Emo away, muttering, "Come on, you." It was unclear why Ivan always seemed to drag Emo around to bully him, but Emo followed without much resistance. "Am I interrupting your training?" Ruby asked, her voice innocent. Isaac, ever the straightforward one, nodded immediately. "Yes, you are," he replied, surprising her with his bluntness. Isaac didn't say anything more, though. Instead, he silently took an apple from Ruby's basket. Grumpy as always, Ruby thought. Didn't he say earlier he didn't need anything? But here he was, eating the fruit she had brought. What Ruby cared about more, though, wasn't the fact that Isaac ate the apple. Her eyes accidentally landed on him, and she couldn't look away. Suddenly, Ruby noticed the beads of sweat on Isaac's neck. Without thinking, she stealthily reached out to wipe them. Isaac reflexively turned to her, eyebrows raised. "What are you doing?" he asked, a sharp edge in his voice. Ruby quickly withdrew her hand and awkwardly explained, "I just wanted to wipe the sweat off your neck." But Isaac only glared at her, muttering, "It's dirty." "What's dirty?" Ruby thought, confused. "But I washed my hands when I arrived," she explained with a hint of frustration. "It's not your hands," Isaac mumbled, cursing under his breath, though it wasn't clear why he was suddenly so annoyed. His reaction was confusing, and Ruby felt the growing tension between them again. Though the atmosphere had softened since his birthday party, they still weren't as close as they once were. Still, progress was progress, right? "By the way, your father is back," Ruby tried to shift the conversation. Isaac, ever the blunt one, responded with a casual, "oh," without a hint of sincerity. His nonchalance left Ruby feeling even more awkward. "And he seems a little angry," Ruby continued. Isaac, unbothered, tossed the apple aside. "That old man's always angry," he said, as if it were nothing. Ruby glanced at the discarded apple, her mind racing. "That's scary. I almost became that apple," she thought, dreading how she'd bring up what was really on her mind. Noticing her suspicious expression, Isaac asked, "You've had a weird look on your face for a while now." "Me?" Ruby stammered. "Who else is here besides you?" The words hit her square in the heart, and she resorted to her usual tactic, making cute, exaggerated expressions in front of Isaac, but as always, Isaac didn't find them cute at all. In fact, he gave her a look of disapproval before turning away with a blunt, almost sinister comment. "I really want to open your skull." "What?" Ruby's eyes widened in disbelief. "What's so scary about that?" It was even worse than what she had imagined. Still trying to figure out what to do about her father's anger, Ruby sighed. Isaac sat beside her, his curiosity now piqued. So, what did the noble Lord Gia say? He asked. Ruby hesitated, struggling to find the right words. Well, he said we haven't fulfilled our duties as a real couple. Her voice faltered as she spoke. Isaac looked at her blankly. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. Ruby blushed, deeply embarrassed. Does he really not know? She thought, her face flushing even more. You know, the wedding night, she finally managed to say. Isaac's eyes widened in realization. What? He blinked, taking a moment to process her words. Did he seriously need to be told directly to understand? Ruby groaned internally. If he had figured it out earlier, they wouldn't be this embarrassed right now. But what surprised her even more was that Isaac spoke up first. You don't have to worry about it, he said suddenly, his tone softening a bit. I told you before, it's not something you need to stress over. Ruby bit her lip, but, my father? Isaac cut her off gently. He's my father too. I can deal with him. Ruby sighed, caught between relief and confusion. Isaac's calmness was comforting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this unresolved tension between them would eventually catch up to her. Why do you suddenly care about that? I thought you weren't looking forward to it. Ruby started, her voice faltering as she tried to keep her composure. It's just, after becoming your wife, I thought we should fulfill our duties as husband and wife. And I said, I didn't want to go home. I was completely serious. As she spoke, Ruby stood up, taking a deep breath before continuing, because I like you very much. Just being near you is enough for me. If you want to marry someone else, I'll accept it, but I hope it's your wish, your own wish, not because someone else forced you. Isaac sat in silence, listening to her every word. Perhaps this was the heartfelt confession Ruby had been holding back for a long time, a release of emotions that had been weighing on her. Do you hate going home that much? Isaac asked, his tone low as though he was about to reprimand her. Ruby shouted, It's because you're here! Really? Is that the only reason? Isaac questioned, his gaze skeptical. Ruby had spent so much time trying to prove her devotion, but he still doubted her sincerity. Her frustration was bubbling over. You're right, Ruby said defiantly. If I sleep with you, no one else can interfere with this marriage. Isaac stood abruptly, now face to face with Ruby, his expression serious. If you want to change your mind, say it now. His sudden intensity made Ruby a little apprehensive, but she stood her ground, refusing to waver. I won't change my mind, she said firmly. Isaac continued to study her, his eyes searching for any hint of dishonesty. Then, without another word, he turned away. All right then, I'll see you tonight, he muttered. Ruby was stunned for a moment, processing what he said. But soon, a wave of excitement washed over her, her eyes lit up. Really? Really? Tonight? She exclaimed. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just so happy. So should I come to your room or should I wait in mine? Actually, it's better if I come to you, right? Her words tumbled out in rapid succession, excitement overflowing. Isaac, already a few steps away, turned back sharply to shut her up. Don't play any tricks. Go take a nap. Yes, see you later, Ruby called after him, giddy and unable to contain herself. Do you have any shame left? She thought, laughing inwardly. After all, Chessa had sworn Isaac would never touch her. Though it was a big part of why she had married him, tonight felt like the point of no return. She imagined Chessa's shocked face if he knew what was about to happen. His crazy eyes bulging in disbelief, the thought made her even more excited. That evening, Ruby changed into a silk dress and sat on the bed, waiting for Isaac to arrive. She twiddled her fingers anxiously, her thoughts racing. Will it really happen tonight? Her heart thumped loudly, anticipation rising. What if he doesn't come? What if he changes his mind? She glanced out the window, noticing how bright the moon was. It reminded her of that day. I wonder how Pooh is doing, Ruby thought wistfully, hoping she'd get the chance to see her again one day. But her thoughts quickly returned to Isaac. Is he really not coming, she wondered, her patience wearing thin. She clasped her hands together in prayer. Please let tonight go my way. Please make my cold-hearted husband less indifferent to me. As she muttered her wishes to herself, hoping for a miracle, she kept her eyes fixed on the door, waiting for Isaac to step inside.